Fairies. In the modern imagination, these beings are harmless creatures, eager to help teenage girls charm princes and help boyhood heroes fend off pirates. But to the common folk of Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales, the Fae were less Tinkerbell and more terrifying. Who are these mysterious fairy folk, and what do they want with humans? In today's story, we explore theories of how the Fae originated and some of the terrible fates that awaited those who encountered the Fae unprepared. But first, if you're a fan of stories old and new that fascinate, inspire, and terrify, you're in the right place. Because here at Mythic Origins, we dig deep into ancient history, epic myths, and strange and mystifying folklore. If that's of interest to you, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. And now, let's get into today's video. There is no single origin of the belief in fairies. These mysterious beings appear in folk beliefs across Europe. From the Celtic race of supernatural beings known as the Ys-She, to the elves of Germanic and Scandinavian folklore, these strange creatures crop up in many different cultures and time periods. Many theories exist as to what the fairies are and where they come from. One theory states that fairies are the original pre-Christian deities of Europe, who, now being supplanted by Christianity, have retreated to hidden places like hills and forests. Another theory proposes that fairies are the spirits of the dead, persisting in the physical world because they have unfinished business. However, a third and more dark origin of the fairy paints them as demoted angels, not fallen enough to be considered demons, but not good enough either to serve God. Instead, they are caught somewhere in between. The variations in the beliefs in fairies are driven not only by regional and cultural differences, but also by theological differences. Those viewing the world through a Judeo-Christian lens are much more likely to see the fairies as demons or demoted angels. On the other hand, those who have ventured into ancient Celtic and Germanic spirituality may view fairies as deities in their own right. As part of her research for the Encyclopedia of Fairies, the British folklorist Catherine Mary Briggs compiled fairy folk beliefs across Britain and Ireland. Regarding theories on the origins of fairies, Briggs distinguished which theories arose in pre-Christian times and which arose in post-Christian times. Pre-Christian theories paint the fairies as the original deities of Ireland and Britain, or the souls of the dead who are not yet ready to move on, or elemental spirits that supervise natural processes. On the other hand, post-Christian theories depict the fairies as disgraced or demoted angels, demons, or the souls of the unbaptized who can neither go to heaven nor hell. Many of the dark and frightening fairy tales that we're familiar with come from the Middle Ages and early modern era. As such, they are written with the presupposition that fairies are not of God. They are notorious tricksters who are at best uninterested in humans and at worst outwardly hostile. The poet Lady Wilde gives an account of how the Irish fairies came to be within this worldview. The islanders, like all the Irish, believe that the fairies are fallen angels who are cast down by the Lord God out of heaven for their sinful pride. And some fell into the sea, and some on the dry land, and some fell deep down into hell. And the devil gives to these knowledge and power, and sends them on earth where they work much evil. But the fairies of the earth and the sea are mostly gentle and beautiful creatures, who will do no harm if they are let alone, and allowed to dance on the fairy raths in the moonlight to their own sweet music, undisturbed by the presence of mortals. Similarly, the American anthropologist Walter Evans Wentz retells a fairy origin story from the Scottish Highlands, given to him by the folklorist Alexander Carmichael. The proud angel fomented a rebellion among the angels of heaven, where he had been a leading light. He declared that he would go out and found a kingdom for himself. When going out at the door of heaven, the proud angel brought prickly lightning and biting lightning out of the doorstep with his heels. Many angels followed him. So many that at last the son called out, "Father, father, the city is being emptied." Whereupon the father ordered that the gates of heaven and the gates of hell should be closed. This was instantly done, and those who were in, and those who were out, while the hosts who had left heaven and had not yet reached hell flew into the holes of the earth like stormy petrels. So, within a Judeo-Christian cosmology, the fairies are understood to be those angels who were expelled from heaven but fell to earth rather than hell. Neither angels nor demons, fairies can range from good to evil. A minority of fairies are good, being benevolent towards humans, insofar that their aims align with ours. Good fairies were kicked out of heaven because they did not love God strongly enough, and remained neutral during Satan's rebellion. But folk tradition asserts that the majority of fairies are hostile towards humans. They are not to be trifled with, and the places that they inhabit are best avoided altogether. Though much of Fae lore serves as a warning for us mortals not to go hunting for fairies, a foolish few still search for them. Worse yet is when the fairies target someone specific for their nefarious purposes. A few poor mortals have found themselves the victims of fairy abductions, being whisked away to the beautiful but terrifying fairyland, while their loved ones in the mortal world are none the wiser. Changelings are one such class of fairy known to carry out abductions. Changelings are small, weak, and sickly creatures that abduct human babies, then impersonate them and take their place. The old fairies do this so that they can spend their last days in relative comfort, enjoying the warmth of a human home and the nurturing touch of a new mother. What happens to the baby is uncertain. Some versions say the human child grows up in the fairy world, enjoying music, dancing, and merrymaking. Others say that the changeling's co-conspirators raise the child to be a servant for fairies. But the darkest view of all states that the fairies are in league with the devil himself. Satan demands that the fairies abduct and sacrifice a child at least once a year. The tale of the eggshell brewer tells of how one woman was able to rescue her newborn boy from the clutches of a changeling. Mrs. Sullivan had noticed that in a single night her son had changed from a healthy, happy, blue-eyed boy to a shriveled and wrinkled babe that would never stop crying. Mrs. Sullivan consulted with a woman named Grey Ellen, who was renowned throughout the county for having the gift of fairy sight. Ellen instructed Mrs. Sullivan to get a dozen eggs, put on a pot of boiling water, and boil the eggshells while throwing the rest of the eggs away. Mrs. Sullivan immediately obeyed. At the same time, she began heating an iron poker over her fireplace, ready to strike the strange creature once she confirmed beyond the shadow of a doubt that it was indeed a changeling. The smell of boiling eggshells confused and upset the fairy changeling, who sat up in the crib and spoke to Mrs. Sullivan with the voice of an old man, announcing that it was 1,500 years old. Mrs. Sullivan grabbed the poker and leapt into action, but the changeling hastened away and disappeared. However, when she looked into the crib, there was her son, her real son as she remembered him, sleeping peacefully as if nothing had ever happened. Unfortunately, not all stories of fairy abduction have such a happy ending. Sometimes the abductor uses powerful magic to bewitch a wooden log, tricking the family into thinking it's their child. As the log withers, the parents see it as their baby growing sickly and feeble. Once the log has rotten, the parents think the child has passed away. They hold a funeral and bury a mere piece of wood, never the wiser that their real child has been whisked away to the fairy world for some time. But all these stories of changelings may lead one to assume that only babies are at risk of being abducted by fairies. To think that would be foolish, as the fairies take interest in many different kinds of people. Fairies are most intrigued by those who are in liminal stages, that is, at the threshold between one phase of life and another. Adolescents approaching adulthood, those getting married, or those becoming a parent soon are at high risk for abduction. Impetuous youths, not heeding their parents' warnings, have strayed into deep forests and hills where fairies run amok. There, they are presented with fairy food and drink. Lured by the sumptuous delights, the children gobble up the food. But once the children try to return home, they find they cannot leave the forest, for the fairy food has altered their very nature. They are like the fairies now. It is presumed that these children will eventually be accepted as full fairies, and that the food is but the first step in a long process of turning children into the fae. Another variation of the tale has children wandering into a circle of toadstool mushrooms, otherwise known as a fairy ring. Once within the ring, the child becomes invisible to everyone outside. They are struck with fairy magic, overcome with bliss and an unshakable urge to dance without ceasing. A few survivors have managed to escape, returning home with their toes reduced to bloody stumps. But the majority of victims cross into the other world, never to be seen again. Young men are most sought after for their labor. Once captured, these men are set to work in forges as blacksmiths and palaces to serve fae nobility. Some men have even been made to fight in armies against rival factions of fairies. Men with a bard's talent are also in great danger of fairy abduction, as they catch the eye of fairy women who yearn for a mortal's touch. Sir Thomas de Ercildown, better known as Thomas the Rhymer, was a medieval Scottish lord, poet, and prophet. The legends say that the Queen of Elfland fell in love with him because of his otherworldly beauty and singing ability. She whisks him away to her world, and after 7 years, once returned to the human world, Thomas has gained the gift of prophecy. Fairy abductors also take quite an interest in human women, for different reasons. Nursing mothers are sought after to suckle fairy babies. Fairy lords, entranced by the beauty of human women, attempt to seduce them, and if successful, whisk them away to be their brides. The fae seem to lack the ability to keep their population up on their own, requiring a periodic influx of human men and women to help replenish their numbers. Fairy abduction stories have captivated the common folk of Celtic nations for centuries. Ranging from romantic to terrifying, these strange beings have the power to charm, seduce, and impersonate. Whether the fairies are fallen angels, old gods, or something else, only one thing appears certain: that the fairies are as interested in us as we are in them. If you have any theories on what you think the fairies are, please comment below. We've only scratched the surface of our research into the fae. Join us in future episodes as we dive deep into fairy lore from across the world. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Feel free to reach out to me on YouTube or Instagram to say hi or request a video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.